Before we get into this episode, there's something that might be of interest that I wanted to tell you about. Scene and Heard, who run this podcast, have been asked by Scotland Food and Drink to undertake a strategic review of the Scotland Food and Drink Excellence Awards. Now, these Excellence Awards have been going for almost 20 years and are a huge mainstay of the food and drink sector. But it's time to ensure that they're still relevant. So if you have ever been involved in the Scotland Food and Drink Excellence Awards, or even if you've ever had an opinion about them, we would love for you, please, to complete our survey. So if you go to the On Farm Twitter, which is at @on_farm UK, and click the link in the bio, there will be a tab in there that will take you to the survey, and it should only take you a very short while to complete, but we would be enormously grateful. Hello and welcome to this latest episode of On Farm. I'm Anna Davis and I'm very grateful that you're here listening to us again. We've got no royalty this time, unfortunately, though. After the excitement of Monty speaking with Her Royal Highness the Princess Royal last week, we are back to a little bit of normality. But please do go back and have a listen to that episode if you haven't heard it. Princess Anne was on farm with us to launch a new research fellowship at the Morden Research Institute to try to find a cure for the dreadful and extremely mysterious disease that affects horses, equine grass sickness. So she gave us a great insight into that awful disease and also talked about her love of the Pony Club and Riding for the Disabled Association. So loads of really interesting stuff to listen to last week. Now, something you might not realise about On Farm is how it's made and by whom. If you've been listening for a while, you'll know that I present some episodes while Monty, aka Ross Montague, is the host of others. Well, Monty and I together run a rural PR and marketing agency called Scene and Heard. We offer a range of comms services going from branding and web building to media relations, social media management, videography and, of course, podcasting. But we felt quite strongly for a while that rural Scotland needed more of a champion. So we launched On Farm because we wanted to create this new platform for rural businesses and rural communities to be able to tell the real story of what goes on within food and farming. So 50 odd episodes later, we're still here and we're really enjoying it. But the reason I make this connection today is that we're hearing from somebody shortly who Monty and I both deal with often on behalf of our PR clients. So today's episode is a chat with Gordon Davidson, who is the news editor at The Scottish Farmer. Gordon is well used to me ringing him up or sending him emails and trying to sell him stories, not tell him stories. And a bit later, he'll share his best tips with you if you're a rural business and you would like your story to end up in The Scottish Farmer. We will get to that interview in a little while, but first we've got a bit of news of something happening soon that might be of interest. Over 2 weeks in March, starting on the 6th, I believe, the Scottish Rural Parliament is taking place. That is effectively a coming together of people from Scotland's rural and island communities to get their voices heard by those in charge. Now, March isn't very far away. In fact, you'll be listening to this episode on the 1st of March, but there is enough time for you to get involved if this sounds interesting or useful at all. So to tell us more, here is Acting Chair of Scottish Rural Action, Fiona Morrison.
98% of the landmass, including 93 inhabited islands, are defined as rural across Scotland, because 80% of the population of Scotland lives in the urban towns and cities. So it's really important that the Rural Parliament is a voice for everyone living and working in rural Scotland. It's the only thing really that brings everybody from that rural diaspora together. There has been 3 previously, one in 2014 in Oban, one in 2016 in Brechin, and 2018 in Stranraer. And here we are on a virtual platform this year, and it starts on the 6th of March and will be spread over 5 days and numerous sessions covering all sorts of sectors of the rural economy until the 18th of March.
Fiona says taking part in the Parliament is a direct line into policy making. So things are agreed at the Parliament and then will get written up as a manifesto which will be fed directly into decision making at Holyrood. So it's well worth getting involved and engaging.
So the kind of issues that we're going to be looking at are democracy and local governance, And that is really important in rural communities. It's important everywhere. But if you're feeling slightly removed from the centre, then it's very important that you feel your voice is heard. We're going to be looking at tourism, but also the use of coastal land and the seabed, climate change, transport services, rural and island transport services, food, looking at the design of towns and villages and so on, and rural health and well-being. It's a whole range of subjects. So it's important that those who have lived experience of what that means for them in their community can come and feel that their voice is heard.
Thank you very much to Fiona, and wishing her all the best with the preparation for the important event. To find out more, just go online and search for Scottish Rural Parliament. You can find the programme of events and an option to register to take part. It's totally free, and the Scottish Rural Parliament will be the subject of an on-farm episode in a few weeks, so we'll be hearing directly from people who are actually taking part. But now on to the main event for this episode. I've no doubt you've seen his name plenty and read pages and pages of his work over the years, but never maybe known too much about the man himself. So I'm very pleased to say that here is the Scottish farmer's Gordon Davidson. Thank you very much for joining us. You and I have met each other many, many times before, but a lot of people listening will never have seen your face and never have heard your voice. They'll just have read many, many pieces that you've written in the Scottish Farmer over the years. We can't help them when it comes to seeing your face because we're a podcast.
That you're helping them by not letting them see my face, believe me.
Nonsense.
Oh, Lord. I think I've got a good voice for radio. I've been told I've got a fairly good voice for radio, but not my face. Good God, no.
Well, here we go then. This is similar to radio. So, yeah, we do want people to have the opportunity to hear and learn more about you and what your job, what you do and why you do it. And then we might ask you to give people some tips at the end. If there's any business out there that's always wanted to be in the Scottish Farmer, you might be able to give them some tips as to how the best ways to go about getting some coverage. But I remember from a chat we had not that long ago, actually. We were sitting next to each other at the NFUS AGM, and you were telling me that your background has got absolutely nothing to do with farming. So I'd love to hear how you ended up and why you ended up working at the Scottish Farmer. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
I wouldn't say absolutely nothing to do with it. My grandfather was a gamekeeper down at the Castlemilk estate in Lockerbie. And my dad was probably heading in that direction as well. But then the Second World War dragged the whole family up to the shipyards in Glasgow to work in heavy engineering. So Dad did that all his life. I was born in Clydebank. But what happened was when Dad got a little bit older, he moved back out into the countryside because he wanted to have dogs and pheasants and stuff, even though he was still working as an engineer. So I got moved out towards Drimmen and had a kind of upbringing that was a mixture of the city and also knowing how to, catch a rabbit or, that kind of country stuff I had a bit of. So when I went for the Scottish Farmer interview, I had a degree in communication studies out of Glasgow Tech. So I went for the Scottish Farmer interview. Basically, I was the only person there that had even the slightest connection to agricultural matters. I mean, lots of people had applied for it, like journalists, but I was like, well, I once went out with a farmer's daughter from Drimmen and I helped her dad with the sheep and I've had rabbits, and I was like, right, you're in. So I've lived in the countryside a long time, but certainly I'm not from a farming background.
And I don't want to give away your age, but how many years ago was that when you first joined?
Well, I'm 54 now, I think. Yeah, I've been there more than 30 years. I got my 30-year. Wow. I didn't get a gold watch. I think I got a gift card or something. That was a few years ago now. So time flies by when you're having fun. But maybe 33 years I've been there. I think I joined when I was about 22.
Gosh, wow. And I think 33 years definitely qualifies you now as having an extensive knowledge of farming, which is evident when you read The Scottish Farmer. But I think 30 years is a very, very decent apprenticeship. You must have picked up an awful lot over that time. What do you think what's the most important thing you think you've learnt about Scottish farming since you started at the tender age of 22?
Well, because I've actually witnessed it in this kind of deep geological time way, 30 years, is Scottish farming's adaptable. the stuff that was happening when I was first started there, it's completely changed. In 30 years, it's completely changed. And everyone would say it's a very conservative, slow industry to change. But there's things that I first wrote about 20, 30 years ago that folk were laughing at the time, going, ha, you know. Things like organic food, things like environmental concern, wildlife. People were just dismissed it out of hand. And now it's the norm. You know, and it's beyond the norm. People are telling me about it now as if I don't know. And it's a very adaptable industry, and it has changed beyond all measure. Some of the people in it haven't changed right enough, but it has changed beyond all measure.
And it must be, you say it's a very adaptable industry, which I think it is. It must have really got under your skin though, because let's face it, if you didn't like Scottish farming and you weren't interested in what it was up to, you would have gone off years ago to work somewhere else. So what is it that's got under your skin and made you stay in that job for 30 odd years?
Well, first of all, the Scottish Farmer's a national paper. I mean, it has this kind of, we won't even call it a narrow focus. Maybe from the outside it looks like a narrow focus, but we concern ourselves with what's happening on like 80% of the landmass of Scotland, from Shetland at the top to way down into Northumberland. You look at it, things like the Scotsman and the Herald are actually quite parochial. All they care about what's happening about a square mile in the middle of each capital city. We are the whole country. You know, if a ditch gets blocked somewhere up in Lawrencekirk, we'll hear about it. If, a fox dies in unfortunate circumstances in Peeblesshire, we'll hear about it. You know, we're totally Scotland's national paper. We're right down in the detail of the villages. I mean, we don't carry that much of that. We hear it. We don't often print it. So it's fascinating. And you get to travel from, as I said, Shetland down into England and meet people and see the countryside and so much variety. So much variety in the job. You'd be writing about different stuff every week and meeting different people and hearing new ideas. So it's, you know, from the outside it might be, it's just farmers moaning about the price of whatever, but within it, it's fascinating and ever changing.
Indeed, and it's more than just farming. I say just farming. I don't mean just farming, but it's more than farming. It's farm diversification. It's all the other things that are happening on farms or being run by farmers or members of the family. So there is so much more to it. And as you say, that's changed exponentially over the years.
Well, yeah, I think I remember back when I had more hair and less waste. The wind turbine thing was coming up on my radar a little bit. I was hearing from some people, and I went to, I think, the publisher and the editor and said, I think we should put some pages in about renewables. And I was like, we'll give you one page and see how it goes. and now, the turbine thing's almost past its peak, I would say, but that's been a great. And that's not finished yet. I remember speaking to Maitland Mackey, because he was ahead of the curve on this thing, and he was trying to get lots and lots of farmers to sign up for a sort of dispersed energy company. So if everyone put in some turbines and pulled it, a bit like the milk boards, and pulled this energy, they could be as big as SSE or whatever. And he never got to do that, but his thinking was great. I still see farmers as being, I could diverge here quite a lot, but back in the day, go back to the 1800s and 1700s, the farmer would be not quite the local laird, but he'd be very much depended upon by the local village. He'd be the employer, he'd provide the food, he'd provide the fuel, and it would, the farmers would sit around the village and be keystones of the community. That's kind of gone. Kilmarnock forgot it was an agricultural town and just became what it was, and the farms exist around it, and near the twain shall meet. There's a future coming, perhaps, when farmers, if you've got energy storage on farm, if you have batteries, if everyone's got electric cars, that farms will become once again really important to their local community. People will go up, charge their car, get their milk from the vending machine and such like, and the farm could once again become this sort of central point of rural communities. And as we're all working from home, maybe rural communities are going to become more important, because why the hell would you go to the city? All the shops are shut, the parking costs a bomb, and you're not meant to work in an office anymore. So a decentralised country would drive economic activity back into the rural areas, and the need for power, the need for food, and that could be farmers.
Yeah, absolutely. And I suppose we've kind of seen that. we're almost a year now since lockdown 1 started, and we interviewed, just one example here, but we interviewed a very young girl from Aberdeenshire who took it upon herself to set up a food hub, basically. You'll know about this. She rallied together over 50 local food producers and set up a delivery system to the local community. Well, that is all about putting farmers and the small-scale food producers, many of whom are farmers, many of whom aren't, putting them back at the centre of our universe, effectively. And that's happened locally to me. The dairy farm, Yester Farm Dairies, who set up a delivery system. Now it's looking like it's going to be a permanent fixture, which is fantastic. And they are very much becoming more of a hub. They're not just selling their own products, but products from other local businesses. And so I think what you say is true, and perhaps accelerated by the necessity of COVID and us all being stuck at home. So it's a good thing, really.
If that's the legacy of COVID, it's a great thing. It make us a bit more like the French. I think Britain lost its connection with local food during the war. We got very fond of spam and things arriving in tins from the central government, and we just never got over that. Whereas now we're being forced back out into the countryside, and it has implications for public health as well. If people start eating a bit more locally, a bit more fresh, it improves public health, which has huge implications for the NHS. So, it all comes back to food and your choices. And if I don't want to denigrate supermarkets, they did their job, but I think people are maybe looking at that model now and going, well, it's maybe not sustainable anymore.
Yeah. And demands are changing. People want that traceability, they want that local, and they want that quality, which isn't always delivered by the supermarkets. Sometimes, not always. Just going back to something you said earlier, which really piqued my interest, when you said, if it's going on, we hear about it. And that's really interesting because, I run a PR company. So, I'll send you a press release if something's going on in my world. Not everybody's going to send you a press release. So I'm really curious, do you get a lot of phone calls, emails, carrier pigeons from people all over the country who are saying, Scottish farmer need to know about this? I'm really curious how the wider community communicates with you.
Now, I get a little bit of that. But I mean, I'm pretty much a desk jockey, so I don't get nearly. Our network would be the business end of the operation. The people from who go out to the sales and shows. They get tip-offs given verbally. That's the main way. Is that I heard this, I heard that. That's the most common thing. And people go out to do farm features, and you go to a farm feature. I know I do farm features myself occasionally, but not nearly as much as some of the rest of them. And you hear all sorts in a farm feature. You can't print half of what you hear. So no, a lot of it is verbal. We used to get lots of letters. I don't think anyone sends letters anymore, and if they do, they're not getting to me. Emails, of course. But, people don't like putting some stuff in writing. So more often than not, it is because we are out and about, up and down the country, not this last year, but generally meeting folk face to face. That's where you're hearing stuff. And I do the farm shows during the summer, or do my share of farm shows during the summer. And that's a great place for picking up stories and scurrilous gossip and slander and so on and so forth.
Printable stuff and stuff you can't print, as you said.
Yeah.
Now kind of suppose that's interesting because that verbal chit chat, the informal stories, hasn't been happening for the last year. And how's life changed for you and for the Scottish farmer since the pandemic struck?
Well, we're all working from home, which obviously that was from March last year, which probably suits maybe the majority of them because we've got some far-flung farmers. We've got Patsy's there up in Crieff. And Kenny's down in the borders, so it'd be quite a pain for them to travel into the city centre Glasgow every day to write about farming. What better place to write about farming than sitting on a farm? So for us on a practical day-to-day basis, it's fine. We're all sat and we could be on screens like this RTU. What we are missing is getting out and about. The Scottish farmer during the summer runs on show coverage. In the news section, I'll be putting in photos of that are taken at shows, and the pages will be full of pictures of cows. And of course, we didn't have any of that last year. None of it.
No.
We're having to dig through archive stuff to put in, and that was, That was a blow,
It's tough. I know, and they're starting to be cancelled left, right and centre again.
They are.
For this year. Yeah, so it could potentially have another year of the same, which is really sad for so many reasons. But I guess you mentioned right at the beginning in your introduction that you're also, in charge of digital content. And I'd love to explore that because, the way in which people consume news is different now. 5 years ago, nobody had heard of a podcast really. And, people are on social media. So you've still got, and you will always have your core readership who like to see a physical copy of The Scottish Farmer. But can you tell us a bit about how your readers are changing the way that they interact with you in this kind of digital world?
Certainly our digital footprint has increased this last year. The website traffic has gone up. I think at the beginning of last year I was worried that this is it, we've got nothing interesting to tell people, they'll just not come. But because they're not getting out and about as much, the website has got much busier. I'm doing more of a daily news service than I think I've ever done. Obviously, social media is the big deal as well. It's something like 50% of our traffic comes via Facebook. So folk are going on social media and seeing stuff and then going onto the website and reading about it.
Well, it's never ending. Social media is never ending. It doesn't finish at 5 o'clock when most people would like to be heading home or switching off the computer. So it's a big responsibility. How do you manage it on a practical level? Do you have a rota of responsibility within the team for who's posting on social media, or do you just kind of play it by ear?
Yeah, I mean, I'm at my computer more than most, so I kind of take charge of the news side of things. Julie White on the business desk certainly takes charge of a lot of that side of things. But everyone in the office uploads to the web, uploads to social media to some extent or another. What we're trying to finesse a little bit is when people actually want to see it. Social media runs 24 hours, but farmer social media is from kind of 6 o'clock in the morning till about 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And then maybe a couple of funny things for the evening.
I think we all need a bit of a mood lightener sometimes. Have you got any particularly funny stories from your 30-odd years working at the Scottish Farmer and meeting farmers? Obviously, the ones that are suitable for broadcast, but there must be a few, are there?
No. The funny stuff can go in my autobiography.
Oh, right, yeah. When's that going to be available?
When I'm dead.
Have you started writing it yet?
Oh yeah. It's about this thick already. But that's that literally that gets handed to my family when just as the coffin disappears into the burner. Hey, here you go.
And I suppose you're working in the right place to get a publishing deal for that. So that's probably all all sorted already, is it?
I actually wrote my next door neighbour through the wall there, who's now sadly passed away, was a kind of 95-year-old Jamaican man who came to Glasgow during the war, literally on a banana boat. That's where the phrase comes from. Do you think I came up the Clyde on a banana boat? The Fifes boat used to bring Jamaican immigrants in, and he ended up working for the RAF as a Morse code operator. Then became a head school teacher. He was Glasgow's or possibly Scotland's first black head school teacher.
Wow!
So I did his autobiography a couple of years ago, and so I know how to do an autobiography.
Oh, amazing.
His life was more interesting than mine, to be fair,
There'll be plenty of people within the Scottish agricultural industry who should or deserve to have a biography written about them. So perhaps that'll keep you busy in your retirement. You can have a second career.
I think if there was more time now, because we're just basically filling the news pages all the time, sometimes it's only when someone's obituary comes in you go, wow, that's a really interesting story. That deserves 3 or 4 pages, and interview him when he's still alive or interview her when she's still alive. So
yeah, that's just shows there's more to farming than rearing stock and growing crops. There are so many interesting people out there. I suppose Maitland Mackey, you mentioned one of them, didn't you? There are people. It's the people who make things happen, whether it's the current fight against climate change or whether it's a disease outbreak. It's the people that come up with solutions and the people that make stuff happen.
It's that old debate about history being, is it broad social movements or is it driven by individuals? I mean, you look at somebody like Mackey, that was an individual who just did not need to put himself to that much trouble. But by doing so, he just dragged the whole industry a couple of degrees in that direction,
So yeah, you mentioned you used to play, Gordon, and I remember you telling me not that long ago about your band. So again, that you and the others within the Scottish Farmer team, probably nobody realises what you get up to when you're not actually busy uploading to social media or writing for the paper. So tell us a bit about your band.
Oh, the band. I've always been in bands. It's When I moved into Glasgow when I got married, I fell in with a crowd of people that put on band nights down a place called the 13th Note down in the city centre, which coincidentally is the centre of Glasgow's vegetarian community, but keep that quiet. A lot of those folk that I used to know when they were wee are kind of semi-famous now, so I've always kind of enjoyed a kind of plankton-like backwash of nutrients from their careers, you know.
Oh, nice.
You know what I mean? It's just that sort of...
Free tickets and stuff like that.
Free tickets. But you look at the price of a concert tickets these days, it's quite handy to know someone that will get you on a guest list, you know, £40-50. I'll take that. That's good, yeah. So that's all. I mean, because when I was quite young when I started the Scottish Farmer, 21, 22, it was quite good to have a separate life that had nothing to do with cows and sheep. So I've ran a record label, still technically running that record label now. The last thing we released was a Christmas single, Just There. So yeah, it's a good wee side thing.
Definitely, and a distraction as well, I suppose. We all, as you said, we all need something else to focus on as well as just the job. So having something else to do is
absolutely.
And I mentioned at the beginning that we might try and pick your brains for a few tips. So you must have some fairly dreadful and terrible approaches from people wanting coverage, but you must also have some fairly good ones. So what works and what doesn't in terms of wooing Gordon Davidson?
Honestly, a simple email is much better. Sometimes people will send us a great big bundled package which has got an email introductory letter, a press release bundled into it, a bunch of links, and it's too much because I'll get hundreds of emails a day. One paragraph going, hello, you know, we are here, we've got this business, you know, would you be interested? And I could read that in a second and go, yeah, I'm interested. So in many ways, that first approach should be simple. Then I'll say, go on, send me some photographs, send me a press release.
Keep it simple. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
But we're very approachable. I mean, the email address is in the paper and my phone number's in the paper. And, you know, just speak to us. The more corporate something seems, the more likely I am to resist it. You know, that's the problem. But certainly we do cover a lot of diversification now, and I would probably argue with the powers that be in the Scottish Farmer should cover even more of it because that's the way things are heading. I have done, when Karen Carruth was with us, we did, there was a lifestyle magazine I've involved in the paper.
Mm-hmm. I remember, yeah, it was good.
We'd go and review sort of farm-based tourism things, which is great. I'd get a free night in a glamping pod. But, you know, you can write about it. You can write about the farm and the history. And like I said earlier on about maybe meeting farmers and finding out more, that was a chance to do it. You'd write 1,000 words about the experience of staying on this farm and the history of the place and the going back hundreds of years even. And that was quite enjoyable. It's a different kind of feature for me to write. You know, a big blathery feature, which obviously I would enjoy, rather than doing a news story. So if people have got an interesting... I did a feature on the Finleys at Galloway, as I was saying. That was great, just to hear them talking about their enthusiasms and all the different stuff they were doing. So... yeah, just get in touch. I wouldn't say there's any magic trick to it.
No, it's for me. I mean,
overload it.
I'm not always successful in persuading you to cover what I'd like you to cover, but I shouldn't always be successful because that would be ridiculous. But from my perspective, I think it's all about the story and it's all about the interest. If you don't have a good story and it's not interesting, then change it because it's got to be interesting to whoever's going to be reading it ultimately, hasn't it?
Yeah. Oh, an angle is always useful, you know, if there's something that stands out. But the Scottish Farmer has been writing roughly the same story for our 100 and how long have we been going? 1872. You do the maths. About 150 years
we've been
going.
My maths is terrible, but that's a long time.
So you know, we've been writing the same story pretty much solidly since then. You know, prices are up for heifers at Hawes, you know. So we're quite used to writing the same story again and again with just slightly different figures. So
the milk price story, that my very first day working at NFU Scotland, I got on a plane and went to Westminster because they were lobbying against poor milk prices, and you said a lot has changed in 30 years, but sometimes certain things don't change. I hope that in 30 years' time you're putting your feet up and not still writing
God, so do I.
for the Scottish Farmer. You'll be writing your biographies for people. So maybe if we take a slightly shorter time frame, what about 15 years? Where do you think the Scottish Farmer will be in 15 years? You've said, there's a constant effort to remain relevant, and you want to cover more things that are relevant to people, like diversification, etc., etc. But where do you think the Scottish Farmer will be in 15 years from now?
Yeah, I think we'll still be going. I think if we do it right, and more people do move back out into the countryside, which I would imagine there'll be a drive towards that. If we maybe put a bit more attention into food, and if there is going to be a network, I mean, we've got farm shops out there, we've got garden centres, we know the score of those kind of Dobbies type places, but if there's going to be a lot more of them, a lot more decentralised, that we should be covering that, we should be cataloguing that, we should be reviewing those kind of things. And if you're someone who's moved out into the countryside and perhaps you have 5 chickens and a desire to find some nice hummus on a Sunday morning, we should be serving that audience as much as we serve the farmer audience. But we can do both. I mean, there's people who don't invest in stocks and shares that buy the Financial Times. I think we still have to be a business paper for the farmers. That's a central part of it. That's a core part of it. We can't just become, I don't want to use the word fluff, but I'm going to use the word fluff. It can't all just be fluff. There has to be a central core of business facts and coverage, and the things that we cover, the sales, we have to cover them and be that asset for the businessmen. But we can surround it quite nicely with the change, with the diversification, with the local food, and with the animal welfare, and all these things that will appeal to a broader audience. So broaden our base, become Scotland's national rural newspaper.
I like that. Something phrase.
Like that.
Yeah, excellent. Right, Gordon, I'm not going to take up much more of your time because you've got a busy afternoon ahead, I know. But a final question before you go. It might be simple, it might not be. What makes your job worthwhile? Why do you keep doing it?
The free food. We're all devastated that the Highland Show's technically meant to be going ahead. Technically, they're planning to go ahead, which is the right way to approach it.
Yeah.
And because the Highland Show, cheese everywhere you look, there's cheese on sticks. It's brilliant. No, but what makes it worthwhile? Every week, if you put out a paper and go, that's a good story and folk are going to like that, or that's a great photo, folk are going to like that, you tend to forget sometimes that you're doing this for an audience. It's easy to forget that. You're doing it to keep the boss happy. You're doing it to keep folk in the other desk happy. Just, you're doing it to get paid. That's what you think. But then you look at the paper and go, folk are going to read this. This is our Saturday morning, and that's going to be interesting, and that's going to be interesting. And yay, we've done it again. That's what it's always got to be thinking of the end user rather than the circumstances around you,
Definitely, yeah. And I think seeing that in the flesh, that's why I still love, physical magazine, because seeing that in the flesh is different somehow, and it must give you that kind of added sense of satisfaction.
Yeah, and we get frequently get told that you cannot line a sheepdog's basket with a laptop.
Oh, Gordon, I really appreciate you chatting. Thank you very much.
No worries at all.
Gordon Davidson, news editor of the Scottish Farmer newspaper. Many thanks to him for his time and his tips and his entertaining stories. Just a reminder, the On Farm podcast, Telling Rural Stories, is made by our team, Scene&HerdPR and Marketing. So that's the company that Monty and I run together, and we can help you with any PR, comms or marketing issues. So just get in touch if you think we can help you. And we very much look forward to seeing you again next week.